On May 23, 2016, in Luton, United Kingdom, there was a brutal attack aimed at Saima Khan, a mother of 4, that initially raised numerous questions. Early assumptions pointed to a strong man as the attacker, as the injuries on her body were severe and extensive. Due to her Pakistani heritage, many suspected this could be an honor killing orchestrated by relatives, believing she had shamed the family. However, the truth was even more shocking, ultimately shattering a once very happy family. Shockingly, one of her closest loved ones was indeed involved in this case. So, what truly happened within this family? To begin, let's explore the details of this family. The Khan family originated from Pakistan and migrated to the UK in the early 1980s, searching for a better life. They settled in Luton, located in southern Bedfordshire, about 50 miles from London. In 1982, their first daughter, Saima, was born. 7 years later, in 1989, they welcomed their second daughter, Sabah, followed by 2 long-awaited sons. From a young age, Saima became a pillar of support and a crucial helper to her parents, who worked tirelessly to ensure their children had everything they needed and a decent life. The eldest daughter essentially became a caretaker for her siblings, managing household chores, cooking, and excelling academically, becoming one of the top students in her class. Her parents owned a small business that allowed the family to settle in a more affluent area with a spacious, multi-level home. Raising their children was the top priority in this Muslim family, so they raised them according to Islamic traditions, while striving to provide a good education. Both sons and daughters were proud of their culture, respectful of customs, but open to learning new things and having freedom in choosing their careers. Saima and Sabah had been close since childhood, sharing all their secrets, always feeling supported by each other, and knowing they could trust each other in everything. The sisters were fluent in both English and Dutch, as the family had lived in Amsterdam for a few years. All the children performed well in school, making their parents proud. As for Saima, she was always a kind-hearted, compassionate, and very thoughtful girl. She wanted to help others, so she attended medical school after graduating from high school. She successfully graduated in 2003 and worked as a nurse at a local hospital for some time. Later, she decided to shift her career slightly and began working as a healthcare assistant. This allowed Saima to arrange her schedule and work hours, which was very convenient as she continued to care for her siblings. Sabah admired her older sister and tried to follow her example in everything. Even as they grew up, the 2 sisters remained inseparable and close. It seemed this would always be the case. After all, who could be closer than one's own sister? When Saima was 22, her parents began considering marriage for their eldest daughter. They reached out to relatives in Pakistan to find a suitable husband for her. Although Saima was born and raised in Europe, where people generally have more liberal views, she respected her cultural traditions and didn't object to spending her life with a man she had never met. Notably, arranged marriages remain a common practice in Pakistan. Furthermore, marrying a European citizen can sometimes be the only reliable and quick way to gain citizenship, leave, and significantly change one's life. For this reason, marriages are often arranged between relatives or people with a significant age difference. The search for a groom took some time, but since Saima was in no rush to marry, she didn't push the issue. Eventually, her relatives chose a man named Hafiz Rahman for Saima. He was only 3 years older than her, had no bad habits, and all the family described him as calm, balanced, and rational. Hafiz had lived his entire life in Pakistan and had never left the country. His parents wanted a better life for their son and believed that somewhere in Europe, greater opportunities awaited him. So, they were pleased to introduce a bride from the UK and immediately agreed. After the family arranged all the details, wedding preparations began. The families organized a grand celebration for the couple with over 200 guests. The marriage was formalized in Pakistan under all religious and civil regulations, after which the young bride flew back to Luton to start the visa application process for her husband so he could reunite with her. The paperwork took some time, so Hafiz and Saima didn't actually start living together until 2008. By then, Saima was 26 and her husband was 29. The couple moved into a spacious, multi-level apartment owned by the Khan family, where Saima's siblings also lived. There was plenty of room for everyone, and all family members got along well. Hafiz obtained a driver's license and began working for the city's taxi service. Initially, he wanted his wife not to work, as is customary in many Muslim countries, so she could focus on managing the household and raising children. However, Saima, who was used to earning her own money and being independent, refused as she enjoyed her work. Her husband didn't argue and accepted her stance. Nonetheless, when children arrived, Saima had to adjust her work schedule significantly. In 2009, Saima gave birth to her first daughter. 3 years later, she had her first son. 2 years after that came her second son, and in 2015, their youngest daughter was born. Saima managed a wonderful balance between her job and motherhood, though her sister Sabah always helped her look after the kids, watching over them when everyone was at work. Meanwhile, from the outside, the Khan family appeared happy and prosperous, yet events were unfolding that no one suspected. The youngest daughter had fallen in love with her sister's husband soon after he moved into their home. At the time, Sabah was only 18, and Hafiz seemed like the perfect man to her. He didn't impose any moral restrictions on his wife, allowed her to work and make her own choices, was kind to all family members, and never raised his voice. Initially, Sabah showed subtle signs of interest: longing glances, sighs, awkward touches, and shy smiles. The more experienced Hafiz immediately picked up on these signals, but at first, he didn't act on them, simply observing her. He felt flattered that this young woman, 10.5 years his junior, harbored gentle feelings toward him. This continued for about 2 years, but after their first child was born, when Saima was entirely occupied with caring for her daughter, Hafiz took advantage of Sabah's innocence and naivety to seduce her. From that moment on, their secret relationship began to blossom right under the family's noses, though no one seemed to notice, or perhaps no one wanted to. Hafiz convinced himself he loved both women equally, and at one point, even considered formally taking a second wife. However, he soon realized that he couldn't marry two sisters, as it conflicted not only with Islamic traditions, but also with all moral and ethical standards. Despite this, his relationship with Sabah didn't end. The affair between the married man and his wife's younger sister was depraved, and therefore had to be kept hidden. The lovers tried to minimize their interactions in front of the rest of the family, but they continuously exchanged affectionate messages and arranged times and places to meet. They often organized intimate encounters in the back seat of the taxi Hafiz used for work, or enjoyed moments together in the marital bedroom when no one else was home. Hafiz would adjust his schedule to spend time with his young lover, while others in the family were at work, ensuring they wouldn't be caught. Everything seemed to remain within the calculated control of this reckless pair. Yet, over time, Sabah became more demanding, seeking more attention, and growing increasingly jealous of her lover's relationship with her sister. By age 23, when her parents decided it was time to find a husband for their youngest daughter, her reaction was very different from Saima's. Sabah adamantly refused and begged them to wait, explaining that she too wanted to pursue her education like her sister, and requested they postpone marriage plans for at least a few years. Although a bit puzzled, her parents ultimately relented and delayed the search for a groom. In the fall of 2014, while Saima and Hafiz were expecting their fourth child, Sabah suddenly realized she was pregnant. She confided in her lover, but he panicked and became frantic. He knew that if the truth came out, it would end his marriage, bring shame to the entire family, and make his own life unbearable. The only solution was to terminate the unwanted pregnancy before anyone found out. Sabah understood this was the only viable option, but she was also aware of how dangerous and risky it could be for her. She suggested they flee to another country where no one could find them, but he flatly refused, stating that he loved his wife and children and could never abandon them. Consequently, the young lover was forced to end the pregnancy, a shocking experience for her that may have seriously impacted her mental health. Previously, Sabah hadn't considered the consequences of her affair with her sister's husband. She had been living in fantasies where she and Hafiz were happy together, without Saima or her children in the picture. But once her parents started talking about marriage, she became fearful. She realized that she had given her purity to another man, a disgrace for herself and her family, even if no one knew the identity of her lover. Now, after the abortion, she was uncertain about how the procedure might affect her future health and whether she could have children. These thoughts tormented and consumed Sabah from within, robbing her of peace and sleep, making her irritable and bitter. To make matters worse, Hafiz began distancing himself after the abortion. He feared a similar situation might happen again, so he became cautious and seemed to have decided to end the relationship with his lover. By then, he and Saima had welcomed their fourth child, and he spent all his time with his wife and children as though he was trying to make amends for his sins. One might have thought things would gradually settle down, but Sabah found it nearly impossible to interact directly with her lover, as he was either working or with his family. So she began sending Hafiz hundreds of messages daily, sometimes professing her love, sometimes threatening to harm herself if he didn't come back to her as before, and sometimes even threatening to reveal their affair to her parents. She was driving him to the edge, and he didn't know how to handle the situation. Since both Hafiz and Saima were working while still living in the family home, they had saved a considerable amount of money over the years, enough to buy their own home by early 2016. In a family meeting, Hafiz brought up this topic, noting that Sabah would soon be getting married, and the Khan family's sons were also beginning to search for brides. With everyone soon to have their own families, the house would become quite crowded. Hafiz pointed out that it was time for him, his wife, and their 4 growing children to have their own home, while Saima's siblings could continue living with their parents a while longer. The Khan parents agreed with their son-in-law's suggestion and supported him. However, when Sabah heard that her lover was planning to move out, she nearly lost her mind. She felt as though her world was collapsing, that her sister was taking away the man she loved, and that she needed to act immediately. Driven by jealousy and rage, she envied her sister and believed Saima didn't deserve such happiness. At some point, Sabah decided that the only solution was her sister's death, reasoning that this was the only way she and her sister's husband could be together. She convinced herself that if Saima were gone, the main obstacle would disappear along with her, as Hafiz would never consider divorce. But as a widower, he could remarry, even to his late wife's sister. In the following months, Sabah scoured the internet daily, searching for ways to discreetly end someone's life, making it look like an accident without raising suspicion. However, her sister had no health issues, no allergies, and didn't take any medication. She browsed ads for venomous snakes and spiders, but was deterred by the thought that other family members might be harmed. Moreover, Sabah was terrified of insects and reptiles herself, so she couldn't bring anything like that into the house and release it. She dismissed the idea of using poison, fearing that experts would detect traces and trace it back to her. One day, she stumbled upon a website offering magical services. A so-called witch claimed to be able to enchant anyone, create charms, attract wealth, heal illnesses, and even cast deadly curses. This final option intrigued Sabah, and she decided this could be the perfect solution to her problem. In early April 2016, the plotter contacted the witch, requesting that he eliminate Saima with dark magic as quickly as possible. She sent him photos and a few personal items of her sister's, which he claimed were necessary for the deadly ritual, and transferred $7,000 into the account he provided, a sum she had saved over the years. Predictably, the ritual had no effect. Saima remained healthy, and she and her husband had found a suitable home and were actively preparing to move. Sabah fell into despair. She tried to contact the witch again, but after receiving her money, he simply stopped responding. Meanwhile, the Khan parents were busy searching for a groom for their youngest daughter, so time was running out, and the issue needed to be resolved quickly. The young woman even considered hiring a hitman, but first, she had given all her savings to the witch and had no way to pay an assassin, and second, she was paralyzed by the fear of getting caught. Feeling her plans crumbling, Sabah decided to eliminate her sister herself. Online, she found information on how to stage a convincing robbery and planned to make it appear as though a burglar had broken in, with Saima as his unfortunate victim. However, the main issue was that the Khan family consisted of 11 people, all living under one roof, and there was always someone at home. While Sabah desperately pondered how to carry out her ruthless and malicious plan, tragic news suddenly arrived about the passing of a relative in a different city. Her parents, brothers, and brother-in-law immediately began preparations for the trip to attend the funeral and pay their last respects. At home, only Saima, who couldn't attend due to work, and Sabah remained to watch over the children, aged 7, 4, 2, and 1. Sabah quickly recognized that this was her only chance to execute her plan, and no better opportunity would arise. So, as soon as she heard about the family death and the upcoming funeral trip, she went to the nearest supermarket that very day, bought a large kitchen knife, and hid it in her room. On the morning of May 23, 2016, Hafiz drove his in-laws and brothers-in-law to another city for the funeral, planning to return late that evening. After lunch, Saima went to work, also expecting to be back no earlier than midnight. Sabah was left alone with the 4 children, giving her time to think everything through once more and prepare for the horrific crime. Sabah put the children to bed early, then went downstairs and called her sister, saying that her youngest daughter was fussy and seemed to have a fever. The news of her child being unwell prompted Saima to leave work early, heading out around 10 p.m. She arrived home at 10:30 p.m., but everything was dark and quiet. Outdoor surveillance cameras captured her entering the house and turning on the lights, but less than a minute later the lights went off. The moment Saima crossed the threshold and closed the door behind her, Sabah attacked from behind, delivering multiple powerful blows to her neck. It's likely the victim didn't even see her attacker, and the initial wounds were fatal, causing her to bleed out within minutes. However, her deranged sister continued to stab the unfortunate woman even after she showed no signs of life. Neighbors heard a few loud screams, but everything quickly fell silent, and no one called the police, thinking it was nothing serious. The noise and commotion awakened Saima's eldest daughter, who came out of her room. She approached the staircase but didn't go down into the dark. She simply asked what was going on. Her aunt shouted for her to go back to bed immediately, and the child obeyed. After the brutal attack, Sabah removed her blood-soaked clothes and wrapped them in a plastic bag along with the weapon. She also added some jewelry and valuables hastily collected from around the house. She intended to dispose of the bag later, but hadn't figured out how yet, so she hid it behind her wardrobe, believing no one would think to search there for evidence. The perpetrator cleaned herself up and only then noticed a few cuts on her hands, sustained during the attack on her sister. She then broke a window near the back door to stage the scene, making it look as if a burglar had entered the house, and, upon encountering the homeowner's sudden return, decided to eliminate the witness. Only afterward did Sabah call the police to report her sister's death. Emergency responders arrived at the scene, but there was nothing they could do for the victim. They could only confirm her death. The crime scene left even the most seasoned officers stunned, as the brutality suggested a personal motive behind the attack on the young woman. According to the sole witness, Sabah, she had put the children to bed and fallen asleep with them in the room after calling her sister and asking her to come home early because her youngest daughter was fussy. Sabah claimed she hadn't heard the intruder enter and only woke up upon hearing a scream. Concerned for the children, she cautiously left the room just a few minutes later. By then, the house had fallen silent. When she went downstairs, she stumbled upon her sister's mutilated body and immediately called her family and emergency services. The police noticed several deep cuts on Sabah's hands and asked how she'd been injured. She hesitated for a moment and then said she must have cut herself on broken glass from the window the intruder had shattered. The Khan family members, overwhelmed with grief upon returning, couldn't immediately determine if anything was missing from their home. Later, however, they reported that some jewelry and valuables were indeed missing. Everything pointed to a burglar breaking into the home and taking Saima's life when she unexpectedly returned. However, the nature of the crime and its sheer ferocity suggested otherwise. Forensic experts counted 68 stab wounds on the victim's body, with most concentrated on her neck, face, and chest. Her throat had been cut so deeply it was nearly severed, and her right arm was barely attached by a thin strip of skin. This led forensic experts to speculate that the perpetrator was a strong man, but no clues had been found yet. When asked if the murdered woman had any enemies or people who disliked her, her family unanimously dismissed the idea, noting that Saima was kind, honest, and respected, loved by everyone around her. However, during questioning, her younger sister suddenly claimed that the deceased allegedly had a secret affair and that a jealous lover might have been the one to kill her. Sabah's words and behavior raised serious suspicions from the start. She appeared calm and seemed unmoved by the family's loss. Her statements during questioning sounded rehearsed, and now it seemed she was deliberately tarnishing the reputation of her sister, who could no longer defend herself. In a bid to find clues, detectives decided to seize the Khan family's computer and examine the cell phones of all family members. This led to a major breakthrough in the case, uncovering not only undeniable evidence, but also shedding light on the motive behind such a brutal crime. Investigators managed to recover deleted messages from Sabah and Hafiz's phones, exposing their long-term intimate relationship. Sabah repeatedly professed her love for her sister's husband, saying she couldn't live without him, and arranging meetings he reciprocated. However, in recent months, the tone of their communication had shifted drastically. Hafiz asked her to leave him alone, insisting it was over. The messages also revealed that Sabah had been pregnant with her brother-in-law's child, but had terminated the pregnancy at his request. The search history recovered from the family's computer eliminated any remaining doubt of Sabah's guilt. For the past 6 months, she had been desperately searching for ways to eliminate her sister, and had even tried to place a deadly curse on her before deciding to handle the matter herself. Thanks to surveillance footage from the supermarket, authorities confirmed that the suspect had purchased a knife there the day before the tragedy, likely the weapon used in the crime. A thorough search of the house led investigators to a hidden package in Sabah's room, containing her blood-stained clothes, the knife, and the missing jewelry. With this, everything became clear. Sabah Khan was arrested on May 31st, 2016, 8 days after committing the crime. The family was shocked and could hardly believe that such intense emotions had simmered right under their noses for years, with their son-in-law essentially living as a husband to both sisters for 4 years. The parents couldn't comprehend how their youngest daughter could decide to end her sister's life or how they would live with this reality. The criminal trial began in October 2017. Sabah claimed that Hafiz had taken advantage of her innocence and seduced her. She alleged that he had manipulated her emotions for years to satisfy his needs, even asking her to terminate their pregnancy, ultimately pushing her to take such a desperate step. Naturally, Hafiz denied all responsibility, placing the blame entirely on Sabah, claiming that she had pursued him. The defendant admitted to planning her brutal attack on her sister, but never expressed remorse for her actions, remaining calm, even indifferent, throughout the court proceedings. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after no less than 25 years. She is currently serving her sentence in one of Bedfordshire's correctional facilities. The case may be closed, but it has shattered a seemingly perfect extended family. It also revealed a horrifying secret, showcasing what a dark, jealous, and twisted soul can do to one's own kin. Yet, the twists and turns of shocking stories continue with the next tale awaiting. On July 17, 2024, the body of Catalina Gutierrez was found in the back seat of her mother's car. Earlier, Catalina had asked to borrow the car to go to the mall for bowling with her boyfriend and friends. The car was abandoned about 1.25 miles from Catalina's home and had been partially burned. Authorities immediately began searching for the perpetrator of this crime and eventually discovered that the suspect was someone very close to the victim. This is a story of friendship and love that seemed perfect, but ended in tragedy. So what happened to this young, beautiful girl? Catalina Gutierrez was born in 2003 in Achiras, a town in the Rio Cuarto region of Córdoba province, Argentina. She was the daughter of Marcelo Gutierrez and Eleonora Vollenweider. Besides Catalina, they also had an older daughter named Lucia Gutierrez. Marcelo was a renowned architect who led many significant projects in Argentina, while Eleonora dedicated her time entirely to the family. When Catalina was a child, her family moved to the city of Córdoba, the second largest city in Argentina and the capital of the province with the same name. It was here that Catalina grew up with her sister Lucia, with whom she was very close. According to those close to her, Catalina had always shown great curiosity and a desire to learn. She loved traveling, playing guitar, singing, and often recorded songs with her father during her free time. Her father's profession as an architect had a significant influence on Catalina, leading her to pursue a similar career path. After graduating from high school, Catalina enrolled at the National University of Córdoba, majoring in architecture. There, she made many friends who described her as cheerful and friendly. Aside from spending time with family, school, and friends, Catalina was also very active on social media, like many young people her age. She often posted photos of her travels, her pet dog, and outings with friends at local bars. She also frequently shared singing clips. Although Catalina viewed this as merely a hobby and had no specific expectations, she unexpectedly gained popularity online, quickly amassing a large following. At the time of the incident, she had over 115,000 followers on Instagram and more than 47,000 on TikTok. In 2024, Catalina met a young man named Ezekiel. He attended the same university as Catalina, and the two began a romantic relationship. According to those around them, they seemed very much in love, and no one could have imagined what was about to unfold. On July 17, 2024, Catalina borrowed her mother's second-generation Renault Clio to go to the mall to meet her boyfriend and friends for bowling. At this time, Catalina was 21 years old and enjoying the final days of her summer break from university, so she wanted to make the most of her time. Although both Catalina and her sister Lucia were adults, Eleonora still disliked her daughters going out late at night. Like any major city, Córdoba had its share of dangers for residents. For this reason, Eleonora initially didn't want Catalina to go out that night. However, Catalina persuaded her mother that she would be safe because she would be inside the mall, surrounded by friends, and just wanted to enjoy the last days of her break. Despite her concerns, Eleonora eventually agreed to let her daughter go and lent her the car. She instructed Catalina to stay in touch regularly, let her know when she arrived, ensure everything was okay, and inform her when she was heading back home. Catalina agreed to all the requests, then said goodbye to her mother and drove off around 9 p.m. Before leaving, she sent a voice message to Ezekiel, saying that she was on her way and asking him to wait for her in the mall's parking lot. But Catalina never showed up. As time passed, Ezekiel and Catalina's other friends grew concerned when she still hadn't arrived at the mall. The drive from Catalina's house to the mall should have only taken about 10 minutes, but over 30 minutes had passed. Ezekiel and Catalina's friends tried calling her multiple times, but no one answered. They also sent numerous messages but received no response. Ezekiel then decided to call Lucia, Catalina's sister, to see if she had returned home, but Lucia said she wasn't there. Panicked, Lucia informed her mother about the situation. Around 10 p.m., Marcelo arrived home and was informed by his wife about Catalina's situation. He repeatedly tried to call his daughter but couldn't reach her. Desperate, Catalina's parents and sister went to the police station to report her missing. A few minutes later, Catalina's boyfriend and friends also arrived at the station to provide information. Ezekiel played the recording that Catalina had sent earlier that evening for the police. While Ezekiel was talking to the police, Catalina's friends started calling other acquaintances, hoping someone might know something. Among those contacted was Nestor Daniel Aguilar Soto, 21 years old. Nestor studied architecture with Catalina and was one of her close friends. He had moved to Córdoba in 2021 to start his university studies, which is how he met Catalina. Nestor did not have family in Córdoba. He lived alone in the city, while his family was in Bariloche, a tourist city in southern Argentina. Knowing that Nestor was living alone in Córdoba, far from his family, Catalina felt sympathetic toward him. It was said that she often invited Nestor over, and her family also liked him. Moreover, Catalina frequently gave Nestor rides to school because he lived nearby and didn't own a car. At every party or celebration held at Catalina's home, Nestor was always a guest. He also participated in university study groups with Catalina. They had a very close friendship, which is why Catalina's other friends reached out to Nestor, hoping he might know something. However, Nestor told them that he hadn't spoken to Catalina that night and didn't know where she might be. He appeared worried and said he would go to the police station to help with the investigation. Upon arriving at the station, Nestor expressed sympathy for Catalina's family and said he would do everything he could to help find her. At this point, Catalina's sister, Lucia, remembered that a few months earlier, she and her sister had enabled phone location sharing to track each other's whereabouts, and she had access to view Catalina's phone location. When she tracked Catalina's phone, it indicated a neighborhood called Ampliation Kennedy, approximately 1.25 miles from their home. A police unit quickly arrived at the specified location and found the car partially burned. Upon inspecting the vehicle, officers discovered the body of Catalina Gutierrez in the back seat. There were no signs of gunshot wounds or sharp object injuries on the body, but there were indications of an assault. The car's interior was filled with a strong smell of alcohol, as all the seats were soaked with a flammable liquid. Police determined that the perpetrator had poured alcohol inside the car and then ignited it. However, the car doors were closed, leading to a lack of oxygen that prevented the flames from fully engulfing the vehicle. Catalina's body was partially burned, but the fire had extinguished before causing more severe damage. Her body was then sent for an autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. By this time, Catalina's family and friends knew what had happened to her, and they were devastated. Nestor appeared to be deeply affected by his friend's death and cried extensively alongside Catalina's parents. During the investigation, police ruled out robbery as a motive, as all of Catalina's belongings were intact. Consequently, they shifted their focus to the possibility of revenge and decided to interview everyone close to the victim. Among them, one individual particularly drew the attention of investigators, Nestor. In his initial statement, Nestor claimed he was at home all night. However, after a few additional questions from the investigator, Nestor's account started to show inconsistencies. The investigator decided to request access to Nestor's phone for further investigation. Nestor handed over his phone and was then released. During the phone analysis, investigators found that Nestor's phone GPS indicated he had been at the location where Catalina's body was found. Following this discovery, police went to Nestor's house and requested that he come to the station for further questioning. At the station, investigators again asked Nestor about his whereabouts on the night of the crime, and once more, he claimed he had been at home. But as officers continued to press him with more questions, Nestor began to exhibit signs of anxiety, looking around nervously, clenching his hands, and even trembling. At this point, Nestor stated that he remembered he wasn't home the entire evening. According to his new account, he went to martial arts practice around 8 p.m. and then returned home afterward. When police asked if he had communicated with Catalina that day, Nestor responded that he had not. He also denied knowing that Catalina planned to meet friends and her boyfriend that night. However, investigators knew he was lying, as one of Catalina's friends had invited him to join at Catalina's request because she wanted Nestor to come so they could all have fun together. When questioned by investigators, Nestor grew increasingly anxious until, after a few moments of silence, he confessed to the crime. Nestor told the investigator that Catalina was the love of his life and that he had killed her. As Nestor began his confession, the police, having heard enough, interrupted and informed him that he needed a lawyer. At this point, the police had the suspect in custody, but they still needed to understand the sequence of events and uncover the motive. Nestor was taken into custody. His confession shocked Catalina's friends and family. Many people couldn't believe it and even thought he might be fabricating the story for some reason, possibly due to shock over his friend's death. Catalina's parents were the most affected by Nestor's confession. They had always treated him well and welcomed him into their home like a family member. Losing their daughter under such brutal circumstances was already devastating, but discovering that the perpetrator was someone so close, someone Catalina trusted and cared for, made it even more painful. In an interview, Marcelo Gutierrez stated that Nestor was always present after Catalina went missing, offering support to the family. Nestor even claimed that he would do everything possible to find Catalina, pretending to know nothing about her whereabouts. Lucia Gutierrez mentioned that her sister trusted Nestor deeply, and they had a very close friendship. However, Catalina had never mentioned any romantic intentions from Nestor. Catalina Gutierrez's case shocked Córdoba and later the entire country. Many of her social media followers expressed their grief and said they were deeply moved by the incident. The case received extensive coverage in the national media and was aired multiple times on television. Due to the widespread publicity, other girls started coming forward, claiming that they too had been victims of Nestor. One of them was a young woman, who remained anonymous, who posted on social media that she had attended the same high school as Nestor and had experienced many strange encounters with him. According to this woman, Nestor had stalked her throughout her teenage years, and although she reported the incidents to the principal, no action was taken. Another woman shared her terrifying experience with an Argentine news channel, recounting what happened during a school camping trip when she was with Nestor. According to her, Nestor waited until everyone in the camp was asleep, then approached her tent and attempted to assault her. The young woman screamed, causing Nestor to flee. She also stated that Nestor continued to stalk her throughout school. Like the first woman, she reported Nestor to school officials, but they never paid attention to her complaints. The woman said, "I regret not going to the police to report Nestor." She believes that if she had done so, stronger actions might have been taken against Nestor. She concluded the interview by saying, "If the school administration had listened to me, Catalina's case might have been prevented." It was evident that neither Catalina nor her family was aware of Nestor's dark past. Everyone who knew Nestor in Córdoba described him as calm and polite, never showing any signs of malicious intent. Catalina's autopsy results indicated that the cause of death was suffocation, but it was unclear whether it was due to hands or another object. Catalina showed signs of assault on her face and arms, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that Catalina was already dead when the perpetrator set the car on fire. Catalina had been bound and gagged, but it couldn't be determined whether this happened before or after her death. This information was crucial as it could indicate whether Nestor had planned the attack. While authorities continued investigating to better understand the crime's events, Catalina's family prepared for her farewell. Catalina Gutierrez's funeral was held at a cemetery in the city of Córdoba, attended by hundreds of people. The family organized only a memorial service as they planned to cremate Catalina's body and scatter her ashes in Aquiras, the town where she was born. However, they had to wait for official permission, as the investigation was not yet complete, and further analysis of the body might be required. Lucia, Catalina's sister, spoke out on social media, calling for justice through an emotional video compilation of photos with Catalina. She also wrote a letter accompanying the video saying, "You couldn't have been a more wonderful sister. Now we are 2 in 1, and wherever you are, I hope you are at peace. Never leave me alone and always be there to help me. I will need you throughout this life, together in this lifetime and all the lifetimes after. Heaven is rejoicing in your arrival. I love you with all my heart, my guardian angel." Shortly after Lucia posted this farewell, many comments from friends, family, and those following the case began to appear, offering condolences and calling for justice. Lucia later posted a childhood photo of herself with Catalina, revealing a new tattoo on the inside of her arm featuring her sister's name and an angel wing in her memory. During the investigation, police hypothesized that Nestor had killed Catalina at his apartment. According to investigators, Nestor lured Catalina to his apartment by saying, "I want to go to the mall with you." This theory was confirmed when police obtained security camera footage from near Nestor's apartment and the area where Catalina's body was found. These images allowed investigators to trace Catalina's final steps on the tragic night. Footage from a camera at a house across from where Nestor lived showed him carrying Catalina's body to the Renault Clio. It also captured how he placed Catalina in the back seat, mirroring how authorities later found her. Another video showed the car moving down the road at 10:22 p.m. According to officials, this was the route from Nestor's apartment to the location where the car was abandoned with Catalina's body. During the search of Nestor's apartment, police found a ring belonging to Catalina. It was unclear to the police why the ring was in Nestor's apartment, whether Catalina left it there willingly or if he took it from her. In addition to the ring, police also discovered strands of Catalina's hair scattered throughout the apartment. In the washing machine, they found the clothes Nestor had worn on the day of the crime. According to authorities, Catalina arrived at Nestor's apartment at 9:30 p.m. on July 17th. An hour later, Nestor abandoned the Renault Clio about 1.86 miles from his residence. The main line of the police investigation suggested that Nestor was aware of Catalina's plans to go bowling at the mall with her boyfriend and friends. Catalina had even invited Nestor to join them through a mutual friend. They had agreed that Catalina would stop by Nestor's apartment to pick him up, and then they would go to the mall together. When Catalina arrived in front of the building, Nestor was supposed to be waiting outside to avoid wasting time so they could head straight to the mall. However, when Catalina reached the building, Nestor wasn't there. He came up with an excuse and asked Catalina to come up to his apartment. All of this was part of his plan. A security camera installed at a house across from the building captured Catalina exiting her car and entering the building. According to police, inside the apartment, Nestor tried to make some sort of advance on Catalina. It is unclear whether he attempted to kiss her or go further, but what is known is that Catalina rejected Nestor's actions, leading to an argument. Frustrated and angry, Nestor attacked Catalina until she lost consciousness, and then strangled her. At this point, authorities were unsure if Nestor knew Catalina was dead. Regardless, he bound and gagged the victim. Nestor then placed Catalina's body in the back seat of the Renault Clio and drove to the location where he set the car on fire and abandoned it. Nestor intended to destroy all evidence, expecting the flames to burn everything. However, after pouring alcohol inside the car and setting it on fire, he closed the doors and rolled up the windows. This caused the interior to run out of oxygen, preventing the flames from fully burning the evidence, and the fire extinguished within minutes. Nestor then returned to his apartment. With all the evidence gathered during the investigation, Nestor was formally charged and taken into custody. In an interview, Marcelo Gutierrez, Catalina's father, stated that he trusts the Argentine justice system and advised other parents to pay close attention to their children's friends. Eleonora, on the other hand, said she doesn't know how she will continue living without her daughter. Although authorities were close to concluding their investigation with Nestor as the sole suspect, new information has emerged, suggesting that more people may be involved in the case. A witness living in a house near where the Renault Clio was abandoned told police that on the night of the crime, he heard several people arguing outside about whether to set the car on fire. The witness said he only overheard the conversation and could not see who the individuals were. When analyzing footage from other security cameras installed on roads near where the Renault Clio was abandoned, investigators observed Nestor turning onto a street corner at 11:01 p.m. while driving. 3 minutes later, another vehicle appeared and parked next to the Renault Clio, where Nestor was with Catalina's body. A man exited that vehicle and approached the Renault Clio. The footage shows the unidentified man speaking to Nestor before returning to his vehicle. Shortly after, Nestor set the Renault Clio on fire and returned to his apartment. According to the police, Nestor claimed that he walked back to his apartment, but this seems impossible because the distance from the car's location to his apartment is nearly 1.86 miles, which would take about 25 minutes to walk. Yet Nestor took only 4 minutes to return home. Therefore, police believe that someone drove Nestor back. It is unclear whether this person simply provided a ride or had a direct role in the crime. So far, Nestor maintains that he acted alone and that no one else was involved in the case. Authorities continue to investigate, hoping to identify this potential accomplice soon. Currently, Nestor Daniel Aguilar Soto remains in custody at a medium-security prison in Argentina. According to sources, his trial is expected to take place in late 2024 or early 2025. If convicted, Nestor could face the highest penalty allowed in Argentina, which is life imprisonment. This would certainly be a fitting sentence and offer some comfort to the victim's family, as well as serve as a deterrent to those contemplating similar crimes. We will continue to provide updates on the case as new developments arise. For now, let's move on to the next case. Have you ever wondered what truly happens when someone disappears without a trace? Sydney West, a 20-year-old girl, was last seen walking on the famous Golden Gate Bridge amidst thick fog. Her final moments remain a mystery, and her family is desperately searching for the truth. How could a seemingly perfect family find themselves pulled into a world of uncertainty and despair? Join Crime Documentary Files to uncover the unexpected details of this mysterious case and the theories surrounding Sydney's disappearance. Sydney West was born on July 11, 2001, in California, USA. She was the first daughter of Jay and Kimberly West, and she had a younger sister named Faith. The family lived mostly in Pleasanton, California, a city with a population of over 70,000 people, known for its high quality of life. Family and friends described Sydney as cheerful and friendly, always making those around her feel at ease. She was intelligent and loved to chat. From a young age, Sydney had a passion for trees, which sparked her interest in the environment. As she grew up, she even convinced her mother to start composting food waste instead of throwing it away. At Foothill High School in Pleasanton, Sydney was known as an excellent student and a dedicated athlete, particularly in volleyball. In 2017, while still in high school, she moved with her family to Chapel Hill, a city in North Carolina. There, she attended Carrboro High School and became the captain of the volleyball team. After graduating from high school, Sydney began playing beach volleyball and explored the arts. She enjoyed writing, painting, and drawing, but her biggest passion was music. Sydney often performed at bars, singing songs she wrote herself, and these songs are still available online for anyone who wants to listen. Sydney graduated from high school in 2019, and then decided to take a gap year to step back from her schedule and explore herself. During this time, she started blogging about her struggles with anxiety and depression. Later, Sydney traveled to Australia, where she continued playing beach volleyball. She then participated in a yoga course in Mexico, while her parents worked with a college counselor to help Sydney select and prepare for college. Sydney's parents wanted her to get into one of the top 8 universities in the United States, including Harvard, Princeton, Cornell, Brown, Yale, Pennsylvania, Columbia, and Dartmouth. According to sources, Sydney's parents spent over $20,000 hiring a college counselor and covering other expenses for Sydney to visit colleges and then apply. A year earlier, Sydney had been rejected by all the universities she applied to, despite being an excellent student. As a result, her parents decided to invest a bit more to ensure she could get into one of their desired universities. However, even with this investment, Sydney was still unable to gain admission to any of the 8 prestigious U.S. universities, which greatly disappointed her parents. It was even reported that Sydney's father became so angry that he smashed his daughter's phone with a hammer. Although Sydney was rejected by all those universities, she was accepted to the University of California, Berkeley. Her goal was to stay at Berkeley until she could transfer to a university she considered better. However, Sydney's parents didn't support this and felt it would be better if she stayed in North Carolina and attended a closer university. The reason was that the cost would be significantly lower if Sydney attended an in-state university. Sydney was also expected to intern at the company where her father worked, but she was determined to go to Berkeley, defying her parents' wishes. In response, her parents told her that she could go if she wanted. It was her decision. But they would only pay the equivalent of the cost if she stayed at the University of North Carolina. This amount would be close to $10,000, which was moderate but not nearly enough compared to the cost of attending UC Berkeley, which could reach nearly $70,000. Sydney then considered taking out student loans and even set up an online store where she began selling some of her belongings to raise funds. On July 4th, 2020, Independence Day in the U.S., the West family traveled to a lakeside house to enjoy the holiday. Everything was going well until Sydney decided to jump into the lake from a boathouse, resulting in a serious brain injury. Sydney received treatment until August 2020, when she moved to Berkeley, California, to begin her college studies. At Berkeley, Sydney participated in a freshman program designed to prepare students for college life. In this program, new students had the chance to meet others, take courses, and get familiar with the campus. Sydney had not yet decided on a major. She had a strong inclination toward medicine, but wasn't sure if that was what she truly wanted. Additionally, she struggled to adjust to college life. She had envisioned it as one thing, but it turned out to be entirely different. In August 2020, the world was experiencing a global health crisis, so the semester began with mass virus testing, quarantine, and more testing to see if anyone was infected. California was one of the states with strict lockdown measures, making it impossible for Sydney or any other college student to establish a normal routine at that time. Students had to isolate in their dorm rooms without roommates, one person per room. They were also not allowed to have visitors, and could only interact with 12 people who lived in the same dorm building. All classes were held online. Due to the brain injury she had suffered, Sydney couldn't spend much time in front of a computer screen, as it would cause her headaches. This was very challenging for her, considering that, as mentioned earlier, all classes were online. Sydney then decided to take a break from college to fully recover from her brain injury and return the following year, in 2021. Since Sydney had taken time off from school, she could no longer stay on campus. She didn't want to return to North Carolina and chose to stay in California. Sydney stayed at her uncle's house for a few days and also stayed with some friends while figuring out what to do next. On September 29th, Sydney decided to go to San Francisco. There, she checked into the Hilton Hotel in the city's financial district. That afternoon, Sydney spoke to her father for the last time. They talked on the phone for nearly 2 hours, and according to her father, they had a good conversation and expressed how much they missed each other. Reports indicate that during this conversation, Sydney mentioned feeling like she had let herself and her family down. Her father emphasized that she should come home to be closer to the family, but Sydney was against it. On the day they spoke on the phone, Jay, Sydney's father, was in San Diego, also in California. He was there on a business trip and told Sydney that he wanted to see her the next day. Jay's goal was to try to convince his daughter to come home with him, but that didn't happen. The two of them arranged to talk on the phone the next day, but after that day, Sydney stopped answering her father's calls. The next morning, Jay woke up around 7 a.m. One of the first things he did was grab his phone and check his daughter's phone location, but he couldn't track Sydney's phone. Both Jay and Sydney's mother had access to their daughter's location through a phone tracking device. They also had access to all of her social media and bank accounts. Unable to track her location, Jay tried calling her multiple times, but each call went straight to voicemail. With that, Jay decided to call Kim, his wife, and Sydney's mother. He asked Kim to check their daughter's social media and email to see if she could find any information about Sydney's whereabouts. Kim checked everything but found nothing unusual. The only strange thing she noticed was that Sydney had stayed overnight at a hotel in San Francisco, something the family didn't know because they thought she was staying at a friend's house. Kim also saw that her daughter had booked an Uber ride very early, around 6:30 a.m., to take her from the hotel to Crissy Field. For those who don't know, Crissy Field is a park, a well-maintained area located beneath the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's a popular spot for outdoor activities like biking, jogging, and yoga. When Sydney's parents discovered where she might be, Jay decided to go to the location to search for his daughter with the help of his brother, who lives in the area. Jay arrived at Crissy Field, and he and his brother searched for Sydney for hours but found nothing. The next day, October 1st, Jay returned to North Carolina, where he and his wife went to the police to report their daughter missing. Authorities in North Carolina quickly contacted California officials to share the missing person report for Sydney West. The first step detectives in San Francisco took was to interview the Uber driver who had taken Sydney to Crissy Field on the morning of September 30th. The driver cooperated fully with authorities and was soon cleared as a suspect in the investigation. The doorman at the hotel where Sydney stayed was also interviewed by police. The doorman said he spoke with Sydney while she was waiting for her Uber and even helped her get into the car. He mentioned that she appeared to be acting normally. Both the doorman and the Uber driver described Sydney as a very friendly and polite girl who seemed to enjoy talking. A few days after she went missing, Sydney's backpack was found at Crissy Field. The backpack was hidden behind some bushes as if someone had tried to conceal it there. Initially, police thought someone might have stolen Sydney's backpack and tried to hide it, but oddly, all of Sydney's belongings were still inside, including valuable items like her laptop. It seemed that Sydney herself had intentionally left the backpack hidden there. In addition to the laptop, the backpack contained several drawings made by Sydney, colored pencils, some notebooks, and clothing. The next step for detectives was to review surveillance footage from the area and the Golden Gate Bridge. In the footage, Sydney can be seen walking across the bridge with a backpack on her shoulder, wearing black leggings, a teal sweatshirt, and green and black Vans slip-on shoes. She was wearing glasses, and her long hair was tied up in a bun. At one point while walking on the bridge, Sydney turned around and ran back toward Crissy Field as if she had forgotten something behind. According to police, it was at this moment that Sydney is believed to have hidden her backpack near the bushes, because when she reappeared in the surveillance footage at that location, she no longer had the backpack. She was only holding her phone and wearing headphones. The last recorded footage of Sydney came from the second security camera on the Golden Gate Bridge. There was thick fog on the bridge that morning, making it difficult for other cameras to capture clear footage of her. After she was recorded by the second camera, Sydney didn't appear in any other footage. It seemed as if she simply vanished into the fog. To aid in the investigation, Sydney's family hired a private detective named Scott Dudek. Scott, along with Jay, Sydney's father, reviewed the footage from the Golden Gate Bridge security cameras for hours. They analyzed every detail, but after the recording from the second camera, Sydney could not be seen anymore. According to the police, there has been no activity on Sydney's bank accounts, social media, or phone since September 30th. The phone and headphones, the only items she had with her, disappeared along with her. According to her family, when they lived in California, the Golden Gate Bridge was one of Sydney's favorite places. She enjoyed jogging, exercising, and taking scenic photographs there. The San Francisco Police Department conducted an active search for Sydney throughout the city. Her information was added to the National Crime Information Center database, and the case was placed under the jurisdiction of the Missing Persons Unit within the Special Victims Unit. The fact that the Golden Gate Bridge was the last place Sydney was seen, and that she was only seen walking onto the bridge but not leaving it, led both police and the public to speculate that Sydney may have done something harmful to herself. However, to her family, this theory didn't make sense. Beyond its beauty and remarkable engineering, the Golden Gate Bridge is also known as one of the places where many people have gone to end their lives. Reports indicate that since its opening in 1937, over 1,800 people have died at the site. Moreover, some of Sydney's friends, who chose to remain anonymous, claimed that she had attempted something similar on the bridge just days before she went missing. The bridge has a number of special security officers stationed there to try to prevent people in distress from harming themselves. These officers were originally placed there in the early 2000s to prevent potential attacks on the bridge. However, their role has shifted over time to focus on stopping people from attempting to jump from the location. According to reports, one of these officers spotted Sydney on the bridge on September 26th. The officer managed to stop her, and Sydney was taken to a psychiatric hospital where she was placed under observation for 72 hours. When informed about what had happened, Sydney's parents requested that she be kept in the psychiatric hospital for a longer period. However, California law states that a person cannot be held in a psychiatric ward against their will for more than 72 hours. Sydney could only be kept under extended observation if a court order was obtained, which was not the case here. As a result, Sydney was released on September 29th. Sydney did not want to stay at her uncle's house or with any of her friends. Instead, she checked into the Hilton Hotel in San Francisco. She was discharged from the psychiatric hospital one day before her disappearance. Sometime after she went missing, Sydney's family created a social media page called Find Sydney West. At this point, some strange things began to happen. Anonymous reports from people claiming to be Sydney's friends and acquaintances started to surface, alleging that her parents were deleting any comments on the page that suggested Sydney was feeling deeply distressed and might have wanted to leave this life. According to these reports, the reason Sydney felt this way was due to mental health struggles and intense pressure. Other reports claimed that Jay and Kim had removed Sydney's social media posts if they revealed feelings of disappointment or depression. On a blog that Sydney maintained, where she often posted her own poetry, many of her poems were also deleted. Another strange fact was that Sydney kept a prepaid phone hidden from her parents. This phone was found inside her backpack, which was stashed in some bushes at Crissy Field. It said that Sydney would switch the SIM card from her regular phone, which her parents were aware of, into the prepaid phone. There were also reports that Sydney would leave her main phone in her dorm, connected to Wi-Fi, while she went out. This way, when her parents tracked her, they would think she was still in the dorm, while in reality, she was somewhere else. She also had a Reddit account, which her parents only recently became aware of. Moreover, Sydney had private Instagram accounts, so unlike her official account, her parents did not have access to these. Sydney did not add her mother as a friend on Facebook, and even changed her password at one point to prevent Kim from monitoring her. There were reports that, as a teenager, Sydney's father had kicked her out of the house several times for receiving low grades at school. Several friends had to let Sydney stay with them for a night or two because of this. The family denies the authenticity of all these reports, and also denies finding a prepaid phone inside Sydney's backpack. To authorities, the most likely theory is that Sydney died and that her body was never recovered. As you know, the family disagrees with this. The Golden Gate Bridge is the location with the highest number of jumpers in the world. This fact has sparked a movement to save lives by limiting access to the bridge. The movement is led by parents whose children died at the location. With the support of local authorities, the movement proposed a solution to prevent people from jumping off the bridge and falling into the water. This solution evolved into an idea: a stainless steel net positioned 20 feet below the bridge and extending outward by 20 feet. This net is currently under construction. Construction of the net began in 2018, but has faced multiple delays, rising costs, and opposition from local residents who argue that the net's aesthetics and high expense make it impractical and unnecessary. Ken Holmes worked for 36 years at the Marin County Coroner's Office. He was involved in investigating the Trailside Killer case, a serial offender who committed multiple murders in the Golden Gate area during the 1970s and 1980s. However, what impacted him most were the individuals who chose the Golden Gate Bridge as the site to end their lives. When Ken Holmes began working as a coroner, he heard about one or two such cases, but it wasn't until the 1990s that he realized the frequency with which the Golden Gate was used for this purpose. That year, the Coast Guard, responsible for retrieving jumpers or locating bodies, moved its base from San Francisco to Marin County in the Bay Area. This shift meant that when a body was found, the responsibility for the investigation fell to Ken Holmes and other coroners in that county. Reportedly, an average of 30 people visit the Golden Gate Bridge for this purpose each year, equating to about 2 or 3 cases per month. As a coroner, Ken Holmes was required to file annual reports detailing death counts for any cause. To streamline his work, he created a separate reporting category specifically for those who came to the Golden Gate, given the frequency of such incidents. According to Ken Holmes, it's believed that the actual number of incidents at the Golden Gate Bridge is much higher than the reported 1,800 cases, as some bodies may never have been found. In 2007, he released a report detailing 206 cases at the Golden Gate over the past decade. Most victims were white males between the ages of 14 and 44, with students being the most common profession. Initially, Ken Holmes did not think the media should cover these cases, believing that publicity would only motivate others to do the same. However, after years of seeing little change, he concluded that limiting media coverage was not effective. This realization prompted Ken to join the Bridge Rail Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to preventing the incidents he had witnessed. Ken Holmes became a volunteer with the group and aimed to raise public awareness about these tragedies. The foundation's main goal is to install the steel net to deter jumpers. One common argument against the net is that if people truly want to end their lives, they will find other ways to do so elsewhere. However, studies have shown a strong link between the Golden Gate Bridge and these incidents, suggesting that reducing access to the bridge could significantly decrease the number of cases. Between 2005 and 2008, Mel Blaustein, the chief psychiatrist at St. Francis Memorial Hospital in San Francisco, treated individuals brought to the medical center after attempting suicide, including those brought involuntarily. Mel Blaustein recalls asking 63 individuals why they chose the Golden Gate Bridge. The most common answer was that it was fast and easily accessible. For this reason, the psychiatrist is also a strong advocate of constructing the steel net. Other high-frequency locations like the Empire State Building, the Eiffel Tower, the Bern Cathedral in Switzerland, and the Sydney Harbour Bridge have implemented barriers to prevent suicide attempts. Even subway stations in Europe today have some form of protective barriers. The net at the Golden Gate Bridge is designed to prevent jumpers from falling. If someone jumps and lands in the net, trained rescue teams are ready to respond. According to a bridge official, jumping into the net is a painful experience that can cause significant bruising and fractures. This is intended to prevent the person from standing up and attempting to jump into the water afterward. Reports indicate that there has been an average of 30 cases at the Golden Gate Bridge each year over the past 20 years. In 2023, while the net was still under construction, there were 14 confirmed cases, meaning the number has been cut by more than half. In these 14 cases, individuals found gaps where the net had not been completed along the entire bridge and jumped. According to experts, reducing access to lethal means can prevent such incidents and encourage individuals to seek treatment. Returning to the case of Sydney West, although the San Francisco Police Department maintains a hotline for information from anyone with details, Sydney's family prefers that people contact Scott Dudek, the private investigator they hired. Some followers of the case believe that this may interfere with the San Francisco police investigation. As you may know, Sydney's parents do not accept the theory that their daughter took her own life and that her body was swept away by the waters of the Golden Gate Strait. Therefore, Scott Dudek, the private investigator hired by the family, is pursuing a different investigative direction. Scott believes that either Sydney was kidnapped or she simply ran away and does not want to be found. It is important to remember that no cameras on the bridge captured footage of Sydney leaving. They only show her entering. Additionally, no witnesses reported seeing Sydney leave the area. Regarding this, Scott suggests that Sydney may have left the bridge in a vehicle, which could explain why cameras did not capture her departure. Over time, throughout the investigation, the West family and the San Francisco Police Department have received multiple reports of alleged sightings of Sydney West. All of these leads have been investigated but have not produced any results. The detectives in charge of the case have not provided many details about the investigation or any potential leads they may be pursuing. The only statement made by them is that there is no evidence to suggest that Sydney was a victim of a crime. Sydney West remains missing, and her family urgently pleads with anyone who has any information related to the case to come forward. Currently, there is a $25,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of the young woman. What about you? What do you think happened to Sydney? Did she die? Was she kidnapped? Or did she simply choose to disappear voluntarily to start a new life?